if you want to.
Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends. This is Friday, November the 28th, the day after Thanksgiving. And I've got one guest today. I'm trying to think of how to introduce the guy. I've known him for 45 years or so. In fact, you were one of the first people that I met when I came to Columbia. I'm going to introduce you as the granddad of local media, Rod Gelatt.
I was going to say in the Thanksgiving atmosphere, I'm just a turkey.
Not at all. You're anything but a turkey. But Rod Gelatt, you've been in media in Columbia, Central Missouri, for how many years?
Well, start with 1963, and what is that, 51 years?
Something like that. Yeah. And the last time you were on Radio Friends was a couple of months ago, and you were here to talk about OSHA lifelong learning.
Yes.
And I kept changing the subject, talking about the old days.
You just wanted to keep going down memory lane, and I wanted to focus on a particular issue at the time. Yes.
And Rod had to say, you know what, I'm here to talk about OSHA. Have me back again later and we can talk about memory lane.
So here we are.
Yeah. So, I think about how everything has changed in television and radio so fast over the years. When I started at KOMU 45 years ago, it doesn't resemble what they're doing today. No. And you were there 6 years before me. You remember? I mean, every single thing was done live.
Yeah, it was very different. You were in a booth.
Right,
as a booth announcer.
Right, and all the commercials were done live. You either we read them live from the booth, and then we ran out into the studio to do on-camera commercials.
Exactly.
And that half-hour newscast, there was no break in there for film commercials. Everything was live.
Of course, before you came was just a 15-minute newscast, and then the network finally went to a half an hour, and we expanded to a half an hour.
Yeah. When you look back over those early days in television, what do you remember as the most fun, the most delightful?
just getting through the half hour without collapsing on set,
right,
or making any major boo-boo, I suppose.
And there were no teleprompters back in those days. There were no teleprompters. You read it all from a piece of paper, and when we did the on-camera commercials, there were no teleprompters. You wrote it on a big yellow cue card, and somebody would hold the cue card next to the camera lens and read along with you, and you would hope that they would turn it in time when you finished the last word at the end of the cue card.
Yeah, I don't think I could read a newscast from a teleprompter. I have to hold the piece of paper in my hand. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've tried to read from a teleprompter, and I don't do well.
As far as the coverage of news, do you feel that it is better today, or do you feel it was better back then? The coverage itself.
I would say we're not, I'm going to make an awful lot of enemies, but my colleagues know how I feel about this. I would say that the items we are choosing to cover, the news events, are not as newsworthy, are not really worth the time we are devoting to them. I'm talking now primarily about local news. Any place you go in the country, I have this same opinion. There are so many important issues that simply, and even on the network level,
oh my goodness,
that do not get the coverage that they should get.
The one thing I have noticed with the network news is the fact that maybe the first 10 to 12 minutes of the 5:30 news is news.
And then the rest of it
and the rest of it is fluff. You mean that there is not enough hard news to fill that whole half hour that we have to find out about Brad Pitt and Justin Bieber?
For some reason, we now feel a compulsion, I'm afraid, to deal with this secondary or even tertiary kind of news that really doesn't, in my view, merit the word news anymore.
So some people would look at us and say, "Don't a couple old fogies talking about the past there? Get into what is today." Technically, how things have changed.
Oh man, if I were to walk into that newsroom today, I would be at a total loss with the equipment. And I mean, I go back to days when you're processing film,
right,
and then you're cutting it with a knife, or in radio splicing tape. And they don't do that anymore.
No.
And I couldn't do it.
I can remember with the news, they used to run out and shoot news stories, and they'd come back and they would develop that film down in the basement at KOMU and then splice it together and sometimes be running back to projection with it while the newscast was on, trying to get it on the air.
Exactly.
And I also remember how everything, now I was not in the news end of it, I did weather, and we used to draw everything on the weather board with the magic markers. Now everything is done with computers and chroma key.
Yes.
I couldn't begin to do that now.
No.
And we used to do all of our commercials were done live. And in our 6 o'clock news and 10 o'clock news, we would have 8, 9, 10 live commercials in there, bringing cars into the studio. I remember we did a commercial for Arts in Moberly, and we had the living room set there with the air conditioning. Even did costume changes in the middle of the commercials. So it was all different. People who are starting today wouldn't begin to understand that's the way it was done 30 years ago or 40 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know how much time we have left.
We're just about out of time.
Then I won't tell the story.
No, tell me the story real quick.
It had nothing to do with the news, but in the day we were talking earlier about Esther Griswold, who used to do Of Interest to Women. And, of course, she did her live cooking in the studio. The day they made the peanut brittle, and they spread it all out on the table, and they couldn't get it up. And they, after the show, they were going around with picks and hammers trying to break up this tabletop of peanut brittle for her.
Yeah. No, and people still remember Esther Griswold.
Oh, yes.
Esther Griswold, Charlene Law, there was Diane Larkin.
Yes.
And then we had Pepper and Friends for all those years at KOMU. Those days are all gone. But it's amazing how many people still remember the old days. And I guess as long as there's old people like you and me still around, some of that lives on.
Well, speak of yourself, fellow.
Okay. Rod Gelatt.
You're almost as gray as I am.
Oh, I'm as gray as you are. Yeah. You got a few more years on than I do, though. But we're out of time for today. Rod Gelatt, thank you so much for coming by. Maybe you can do this on a yearly basis. We're still around.
Well,
okay.
I'll make a date now so that I can.
You got it. You've got something to look forward to. Monday, Maples Rep will be on, and the Orr Street Studios. Our program directed by Travis McMillen. Reynolds Journalism Institute. Audio is Pat Akers from KBIA. Our floor director is Brendan McDermott, and our assistant producer and guest coordinator, Uncle James Mauser. And this isn't even on tape. It's digital now. Everything is digital. Yeah. Bye-bye.